There is a legal duty of care for all stakeholders in combat sports to establish comprehensive policies addressing traumatic brain damage in respect to their prevention, mitigation, and management. These should be maintained to the knowledge of the day, and stakeholders are duty bound to continually seek out and implement this knowledge. The policy needs to be documented, in other words, in writing, to meet legislative and duty of care requirements, as well as communication to all those the stakeholders have responsibility for. This policy should be readily available and accessible to all required parties. The approach to the policy should be precautionary, erring on the side of caution. It should involve paternalism where appropriate, actively mandating, enforcing practices. The fundamental principle must always be first, do no harm. This helps remove the direct liability that can arise from the imperative ensuring participant safety. All required parties, including stakeholders, must be educated in respect to traumatic brain damage in combat sports. This education is crucial to meet legislative and duty of care requirements, and not only to minimise the potential for litigation, but also to facilitate informed consent and foster a cultural shift towards safer practices. It is hoped that participating in this research will help provide education resources to you. Policy must reflect the requirements for informed consent for participation, which should be documented in writing. In the UK, the legal framework for participation in combat sports relies on such consent. To meet legislative and duty of care requirements, all participants must receive comprehensive information in respect to the risk associated with participation, including for sparring. The provision for informed consent must be voluntary, specific, and granted by participants with the agency, competence, and capability to do so. It must be noted that no child, being under the age of 18, has the capacity or competence to consent to participation that involves harm from traumatic brain damage, and no adult can consent on their behalf. Policy should seek to prevent, mitigate, and manage traumatic brain injury. This may require cultural and rule changes, covered in later videos, particularly in respect to prevention and mitigation approaches. Medical attention forms part of this requirement for management of traumatic brain injury. I suggest that policy is required to state that no head impact should occur in training without appropriate direct supervision from coaches trained to detect signs and symptoms of traumatic brain damage during training, and appropriate medical attendance should be mandatory in both training and competition settings. In respect to medical attendance, stakeholders are duty bound to ensure that correct medical attendance is present. One way of meeting these requirements is to ensure that medical attendees are Care Quality Commission (CQC) registered and have training and experience in the nuances of combat sports. The case law of Watson versus British Boxing Board of Control demonstrates that consent to participate is not consent to inadequate medical provision. It is suggested that policy be placed to recognise, reduce, remove, refer, re-evaluate, rest, rehabilitate, recover, return to life, school, sport, reconsider, and residual effects. These are covered in the consensus statements produced by the Concussion in Sport Group, which I cannot share as they are covered by copyright, yet their resources will assist in formation of any policy. The UK concussion guidelines, already provided to you, also contain many of these elements.